Is your business struggling to implement a robust quality system or streamline your supply chain operations? Many manufacturers face these challenges, which can stall growth and create unnecessary inefficiencies. Welcome to the Manufacturing Connector, your go to resource for solutions that are transforming the future of manufacturing. I'm your host, Jim Mayer, and today we are joined by Katie Armstrong and Mingkai Lin, co founders of Armstrong-Linn Optimal Solutions. They specialize in helping companies like yours identify pain points in operations and finance and remove obstacles that prevent you from reaching your full potential. With their backgrounds in quality systems, supply chain management, and financial strategy, Katie and Mingkai have a unique approach to solving complex business problems. Today's episode will dive into how Armstrong-Linn Optimal Solutions is assisting manufacturers in implementing effective quality systems, managing supply chain risks, and creating forward-looking financial projections that empower business leaders to make strategic decisions. Let's explore how you can unlock new growth opportunities by optimizing your operations. Hello, Katie. Hello, Mingkai. Welcome finally to the Manufacturing Connector. How are you both doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for that awesome intro. How are you doing, Mingkai?
Yeah, great. Jim, that was amazing. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. You're both amazingly brilliant people that have a really cool, novel approach to solving the problems that literally every manufacturer faces. So really excited to hear a little bit about your backgrounds, but also see what this solution is. So as I do every episode, I'd love for you both to share a brief story of you, what got you into this seat today. Mingkai, you're the first in the videos here that I've got in front of me. So I'm going to start with you. Tell us your story, man.
Of course. Thanks, Jim. So I've been in corporate finance for a while, and a lot of my areas of expertise have actually been in biotech and pharmaceuticals. And when COVID hit, I was bored. I started doing my MBA, and I met Katie in class, and we started joking. We said, "We're pretty good at doing some of these projects. Let's start our own consulting company." And for me, I was 100% kidding, or maybe 90% kidding. And then Katie came back and she said, "No, we should do it." And I said, "No, I was kidding." And she said, "No, I'm not kidding. Let's actually do it." So we started talking, and I realized that she actually understands a lot of what I don't know. So I take the numbers, I take a lot of the existing data, and I turn it into something where I can help bridge the gap between a business, management, and the finance team. And I try to tell that story. A lot of times I'm wondering, okay, so how does Katie get the numbers from the manufacturing side, from the R&D side, from the quality side? I don't understand that piece, but I can kind of turn those numbers into stories to help people understand how something is operating, what the current status of everything is. And so when Katie and I started talking about this, I was like, all right, Katie, you can teach me a lot. And now,
Awesome.
so we're here. And Katie has a lot to teach me, and I'm sure she has a lot to teach, our clients, and hopefully learn at the same time as well.
Awesome. Well, that's a great build up to Katie Armstrong. Tell us a little bit about you. I mean, that he set the stage so perfectly. I don't know if I could have scripted that. Mingkai, well done.
Yes, he's very, since we have our own podcast, we've gotten pretty good at this. So pull up things. So thank you for that, Ming. So I have worked really my whole career in manufacturing, mostly chemical manufacturing. So I started out at a really small ink manufacturing company and then went over to an automotive industry company that did plastics extrusion, and then spent the bulk of my career working in semiconductor in photoresist manufacturing. And so I've had a lot of different views. I've worked on the floor as a manufacturing engineer. I've worked with supplier quality, and I've worked kind of at a higher level, supplier management level, and working on more global strategy. So I've had a lot of experience working with operators, with people working directly with the product, and then also with leadership and trying to kind of translate that. And so working with Mingkai has been fun because, he mentioned, how did this the operations side get their numbers and stuff. And the reality is we don't really have numbers. And so it's been kind of fun to work with him because it helps me understand, why there's such a disconnect usually between the finance team and the operations team. And I think something that's been really cool about us working together is that it's so rare that operations and finance people actually talk to each other. Yeah. So we've kind of been able to uncover some really useful ways of looking at things or ways of communicating, and just different strategies and understanding cost, benefit, risk, quality, all of that, and helping each other understand from our point of view, what's most important, and then understanding from their point of view what's most important too. So yeah, it's been very interesting. And I think that's really our main value proposition, is that we can really help you understand, not just from a financial perspective, but also from a quality manufacturing perspective, the best way to kind of help your company grow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell us about, Mingkai did an MBA, small thing called an MBA, because he was bored. Katie, were you also bored during COVID? Is that why you got into the MBA program?
Yeah, I think so I actually got into it just before COVID.
Okay.
So I applied like in 2019, and then it just kind of happened that most of it ended up being virtual.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wanted to gain some business knowledge. My degree is in chemistry and physics. So knowing that I wanted to kind of progress more in the business field, I wanted to add that MBA to kind of round out my skills. So that's why I did it. But being bored, I think, is a valid reason too.
Absolutely. I don't know how many people would like, most people knit, right? Or pick up golf. Mingkai said, I'm going to get an MBA. So tell us about Armstrong-Linn. You kind of talked to us about why it got started, but tell us about that problem you solve and what Armstrong-Linn really does.
Yeah, so the main thing that we're kind of working on that we've helped some clients with is with their quality systems, and kind of understanding where the biggest risk is, and if your quality system isn't up to a point where it's satisfying your customer needs, we can kind of come in and help you adjust it to a point where it is. And then, kind of from Mingkai's side, well, I can let you get into it more, but you can kind of help people understand how to plan more long-term financially.
Right. So I think one of the challenges that we've noticed as we've been working with our clients is that a lot of the smaller companies don't have a very forward-looking type of financial analysis. They don't have a very robust sort of back end and front end, looking backwards and looking forwards, financial view of the company. They have accounting, they have, accounts payable, accounts receivable, banking, all those stuff set up. But when it comes to really understanding what's my visibility on revenue, what's my visibility on the cost of my, goods that I'm purchasing, do I have any leverage in terms of scaling up my inventory and purchases? Do I have any discounts that I can use if I'm doing enough business with a distributor, et cetera, et cetera? So those are the types of analyses that I think a lot of companies don't know that they need at a point where they're getting big enough where they can start scaling, but they still don't need it technically, but they really should have it. So I think we can step in, and Katie can really help streamline their systems. And then ideally I would come in and say, look, now that you have the back end systems streamlined, you really need to have the top layer level to support the now efficient, operations of the company.
I love it. So typically we talk about success stories first, but we're going to weave that into today's episode. So Mingkai, you're going to share your screen and you're going to drive us through the process maps and how you to Armstrong-Linn really do what you do, right?
Yes, I will share my screen. So thank you, Jim. So one of the things that we really thought about is how do we incorporate both of our expertises into a comprehensive, at least a decision-making point for management. And, to Katie's point, she mentioned earlier, there's a lot that goes into quality control and quality, just issues and questions in general. So one of the things that we really discovered as I was thinking about the financial analysis from a corporate perspective is that we never really have something in corporate or financial analysis that says this is how much out the cost of quality was for product X, Y, and Z. This is the cost of quality for this region, this market segment, et cetera, et cetera. When we look at a P&L, especially for gross to net or gross margin, everything is based on discounts, promotions, any returns, any sort of costs that are extremely tangible or easily calculated. And so to the way that Katie and I looked at it, well, there's actually a very big cost in quality and the quality issues. So one of the things that we did, we spent quite a bit of time, sat down and we went through how a quality issue can be calculated and modeled out and turned into a financial impact and sort of embedded within the forecast, embedded within the actuals of a fully working and dynamic P&L.
Wow.
And so, so this is where this decision tree came from. When we start, Katie would be managing a quality department or the manufacturing operations. And Katie, I'll let you take it away here, but essentially we just start with, if there's a quality issue, where do we go from here? And we're trying to use this decision tree to kind of guide us through that process.
And just for people not familiar, that starts with that circle right there, right? The was material returned? Okay, perfect.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Yep.
Where does it go from there, Katie? Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So I think, the biggest challenge we had with kind of creating this and why we created the decision tree in the first place too, was that as we were kind of going through this and I was explaining to Mingkai all of the different things that can happen with a quality issue, that's kind of when he was like, okay, wow, this is way more complicated than I ever thought it was going to be. We need to make this more methodical because there's so many different points where there could be cost added that just from a finance perspective, you just never really look at. And this, I feel, has been kind of the age-old issue, at least from my perspective, having worked in the quality side, the manufacturing side, is that it's getting the finance team to really understand all of the different areas where costs can be added in a quality issue. I think like an age-old example is always with inventory. When they, from a financial perspective, you don't want to throw out inventory that you could potentially use. So there's always a push to get it retested or see if you can use it somehow, even if it's expired or if it has had some issue. And the quality team always struggles to really help the finance team understand how costly the risk of that can be. So having something like this is really helpful with that. And so just kind of taking you through from the beginning, there's a couple different things that can happen if a customer complains. They can return the material, or they can just complain and decide that they're going to use it anyway, which is something that happens quite a bit in semiconductor, as I'm sure you're familiar with, Jim.
Yes.
So that's kind of why we started with that was it returned step. And then from there, there's a lot of different things that can happen. And I think the thing that was interesting to us was thinking about, okay, what happens if you try to rework it and then the rework fails? What's the cost of that? And then you have to, not only have you spent money reworking it, but now you just have to make a full new batch anyway.
Sure.
And, what would you have maybe saved if you just went straight to making a new batch? And then, with the root cause investigation, which would go down a little bit.
Real quick, Katie, I mean, I look at that top part there that was material returned. You could even look at that as that internal quality check before it even goes to the customer, right? You could say, okay, this was this material returned? No, we didn't even send it, so that's no, right? And then you go, if you're finding that internal issue, yeah, am I off base in thinking that way?
No, that's exactly it. And then if you switch over to the root cause analysis decision tree we have, which is kind of another little piece of this, that kind of includes that as well. So we have kind of, was the material returned, customer complaint, like what was done. Because like you said, sometimes you do catch it before it even makes it to the customer, and that saves you something, but there is still a cost to that, right? Because then you're gonna have to go back through that tree and decide, are you going to try to rework it? Are you going to make a new batch? And, at least you save kind of the relationship with the customer at that point. But even then, if you do catch it internally, you may be looking at a late shipment and the customer might find out anyway. So there's, a lot of different kind of things that can happen and a lot of different costs that can be incurred.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, didn't mean to derail you and make
Oh,
you
no,
pull up
that's
a
perfect.
different
Yeah,
slide
actually
here.
helped show more of it. So that was good.
All right.
But yeah, I'm going to kick it back over to Mingkai to kind of explain what is going on with the darker purple boxes, and kind of that's where we say, okay, stop. There's probably a cost associated with this.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, exactly. So as we were saying, essentially, when we get to a point where we said yes or no, there's a lot of decision points here. And essentially, the idea here is that every one of these sort of rectangular boxes is a distinct point of recording cost. And the idea is that when we reach a point here, we have to calculate some sort of cost, including materials and labor. And once we've done that, we can then make a decision again. So, for example, here, if the material is reworked, then yes, we have to calculate how much that material and cost of labor for rework, record that. And after the materials have been reworked and created, did we send it back to the customer? There's a lot of other things going on in the background, but essentially this decision right here tells us, all right, we have to check the new material to see if it's good enough to be sent back to the customer, or it needs to be scrapped. If it's scrapped, essentially we have to do it again, right? Yep. So every time we hit one of these light purple, we have to record a cost. And so from a financial perspective, this is just putting a line item in every single time this happens. And if we're able to do that across this entire decision tree, we have a comprehensive cost of how much something was really, truly the cost of quality. And then I won't get into all of the details, but essentially, if you're able to go through this entire decision tree, you have the dark purples, which are sort of like, points of reports, places where you can have a tangible type of output where you can analyze, okay, exactly what happened in the previous few sections here, the previous few decisions. How do we learn from some of these actions that have occurred or quality issues that have occurred? And then so every section has these cost of quality, cost of labor, and then there are also these dark purple areas where we can have a sort of a pause and learn from what we've just done in the past few decision points. And so ultimately, as you can see, every single decision here, no matter if it's yes or no, no matter if we have to replace the product, ship out new product, or have to do lab and testing, at the very end, it all comes back to this: consolidate all costs and set mitigation plan. And so this is sort of the meat of what we're trying to do here. At the very end, this does take a bit of overhead and sort of administrative work, but in the end, we're able to really quantify exactly how much this quality issue has cost the business in this particular, example. So we're adding up all the labor, we're adding up all the materials, we're adding up all of the business loss, we're adding up all of the potential revenue that's been impacted, and it gives us a place to really set a baseline of saying, okay, how do we go from here? How do we get better from where we are now? And so if we're able to set an actual quantify this actual number, we can say this is 10% of revenue. Okay, next year, let's make sure it's 7% of revenue.
Got it.
And so this allows us to benchmark the company kind of like, how much were the discounts? How much were the returns? Those type of benchmarks where we want quality issues to also be part of that benchmark in terms of a management P&L.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get more into that. Katie, I've got a question for you, though. One of the things that I see smaller manufacturers, and this could be machine shops or it could be other types of manufacturers, struggle with is that root cause investigation. When there is scrap, how do we figure out why, right? And usually there's a lot of finger pointing, right? You guys' podcast is all about that human element side. I study that human element and company culture and employee engagement and that stuff. But one thing that we don't do well, in especially some of the smaller shops, is that root cause investigation of why there was a scrap or why there was a quality escape in any way, shape, or form. Is that something that you are able to come in and help them build a framework to be able to do, not just do for them for, an escape that made it through, but build that framework so it's repeatable for the future?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And if you go over to the root cause analysis tree, this doesn't include everything that I would kind of do in this situation, but it gives a good idea. And I think, yeah, the best way to kind of avoid that finger pointing thing that you mentioned, which I definitely see a lot, the amount of times that I've seen like, retrain as, a corrective action,
Right.
right? Yeah. Which I always, as someone that would audit people, working with suppliers, if I saw retrain on all of their root cause analysis, that was, that would bring that up as a gap, so to speak, in my audit,
Absolutely.
because I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not really getting to the bottom of things. But I think the best way to kind of go about it, and what I would do, if I was going in to help a client set up a system, is that it's good to have a methodical way of problem solving. So you want to have key areas that you're looking at, right? The first is going to be the raw materials, which could be, just in a machine shop, and maybe it's just metal. But anything can go wrong. Any difference can potentially cause an issue, especially I think with precision manufacturing, the
Yeah.
tiniest little change, right? So looking at the raw materials, looking at the process, and some people do look at the operators and they'll say, okay, who's new? Like who's been here for only a year versus who's been here for 12 years? And is the person that's been here for 12 years always producing good material? But then in that case where you're kind of looking at, man machine environment is another good one,
Yeah.
looking at what's changed about the environment itself. But particularly with the process and like manufacturing itself, if it is an issue where newer operators are having trouble creating good quality product, you need to ask yourself, what about our training process is not up to par so that people can just jump in and do it. It's
Definitely.
not so much that the person is intentionally failing. I don't really think anyone comes into work intentionally trying to mess things up. And if they are, it's very, very rare. I think on the whole, most people want to do a good job. And so, the assumption isn't, why isn't this person doing this right? The assumption should be, what is wrong about our training process that's not making this clear, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is something that just lives in someone's head that's been here for 10 years? Like that's not a good process, so to speak, if you have to rely on somebody else's brain, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely, that tribal knowledge, and that's something we see across every vertical within manufacturing. Is somebody's been on the floor for 30 years, and then they retire, and you lose all of that knowledge that they've built and experience that they've generated over time.
exactly. And the other question I really like to ask is, what's your roadblock to success? So what is making this cumbersome? What's making this annoying for you? These are my questions I like to ask operators, right? Asking that question, what is annoying about this process, can get you gold when it comes to problem solving, honestly.
Absolutely,
Like it
absolutely.
really can get to the bottom of some root causes, because like maybe there's something that's just intentionally making things harder about the process that you don't even know is there.
Yeah.
And it might not need to be there. It might be something you can just fix or change quickly, and then it will make everyone's jobs easier and make quality much more easy to achieve. So
And what
yes,
I
kind
love
of.
about what you just said is go to the operator, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think to me, in my experience, that's one of the big missing pieces of these root cause analysis is we don't necessarily, as an industry, go to the operator and say, what is annoying? What do you think? What failed? And give them that ability to help author whatever the change that needs to happen is, right? We have consultants, no offense to you, Mingkai, or myself, because I'm in that boat myself, right? We have consultants come in, we have upper level management, we have mid level management, and we say, okay, here's what happened. But very rarely do we go to the humans themselves who are doing this on a day in and day out basis and saying, what do you think is wrong with this process? How can we make this better? Because they're the ones with the answers. I mean, especially if they do have that knowledge base, that 20 to 30 years on the floor, they know how to make it better. They just may not have felt heard before, right? Am I off base in that?
No, absolutely. It's absolutely right. And I think too, I find like typically with operators, you have to go to them, like they're less likely to come to you with an issue. And I think it's honestly because they've just been talked down to or haven't been listened to for so long. It's like, why would I try to bring something
Absolutely.
up to a manager, right? So, but if you take the time to actually go to them and say like, hey, I want to know what you think, then yeah, they have a lot of answers typically.
Yeah.
I have kind of a funny story actually about this. I can tell it's
Please.
from my days in automotive. So we manufactured the material that went onto like the inside of your car, things like that. And we're having this issue where usually we laminate the plastic onto some sort of high performance knit. And we were having this issue where the sides of the knit were fraying, like they were frayed when they were incoming on the rolls. And so it was causing problems where we were getting little threads on the face, which you probably don't want to thread permanently on your dashboard, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
that would
Yes.
be not great for you as a
Yes.
customer. So that was obviously unacceptable. And so we went to the supplier and we're like in this room with all these managers and we're like, okay, what do we do about this? Can we like maybe use like a laser to cut off the sides of the knit? Can we, do some R&D and come up with some knit that is like threadless or something, like all of these kind of out of the box ideas, right? And so then finally we get to go to the floor and I was like 23 at this point. So I'm, they're not paying attention to me. And so I just went over and went to the operators on the line and I like went down to the end of the line where it was being slit with this blade. And I was like, hey, we're having some issues with like these threads coming off. Like, I don't know if you've seen this. And I was kind of watching it and I was seeing it happen as I was there. I was like, I can see that this is happening here. Do you have any idea why that is? And they were like, oh, well, we haven't changed these slitter blades in like years. And I was like, oh, well, do you have backup blades? They're like, oh yeah, we got them like in another room, right? And so they go get the manager and they replace them. You never saw that issue again. It's like from that point on, it was totally fixed just from that one thing of like changing out the blades. So I feel like that's, I guess, a good example of it's like no one ever asks the people on the line, like, why is this happening? And the second you do, you get this easy, basically free solution, right? Because they already had the blades.
Yeah.
And, we're coming up with like all these out of the box like ideas, which come from kind of what I call the management silo.
Yeah.
When you're only talking to each other in management and you're not consulting with the people that are actually doing it.
Yep.
That just kind of, it shows the value of, it's like, sometimes there really is an easy solution,
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Mingkai, you're the financial dude here. That is not my strength, not my strong suit. And so one of the things that a lot of manufacturers love to see is that ROI, right? And so when you look at that human element, that humanizing element of manufacturing, that talking to your line workers, like in Katie's story, how can manufacturers measure that financial capture, quantify that financial impact of that?
That's a great question, Jim. I think it's always really hard to put a number on things like this that are intangible, right? I mean, there's a reason why the brand name's value on the books is called goodwill or intangible. It's literally something you can't directly measure. I think this is one of those situations where it needs to be a culture shift and it's not just a financial piece of information. And I think using a longer term financial metric to track some of these things is the only way to indirectly measure how something like this can actually impact a company. I think if the culture is to be able to actually gather ideas, empower your operators, and empower your ground level employees to give their ideas, to speak up. I think the small investment in time for the managers and for the operators is basically negligent. In a financial sense, it doesn't cost anything. I mean, if you really think about it, most companies at the management level, people are salaried, right? So if I'm managing 20 people that are hourly, and I say, okay, everyone, give me 10 minutes a week, 30 minutes a week, we'll pay you your regular rate. Just talk to me about process improvement. If I'm the manager, I'm not getting paid anymore.
Yeah.
They're taking half an hour, assuming it's not really costing that much. At the same time, all of that is going into the process improvement of the overall, manufacturing. So from a financial perspective, it's really difficult to measure, but the way to do it for me is an indirect measure like this quality,
Got it.
cost of quality, the metric. There's just really no way to do it except an intangible culture shift.
Got
And I
it.
think in the long run of a company, you will see improvements in your margins. You will see improvements on a lot of these sort of metrics that are pegged against the revenue, because you'll have lower manufacturer costs for products, higher quality, lower return rates. All these intangible type of things are longer term. So if a company is a slave to the quarterly reports, the annual sort of performance to the external investors, sometimes it's two completely opposite driving forces, right? It's a short-term view that is in direct competition to what maybe the leadership or the company really needs, which is a longer-term view of how to improve the company.
Yep, absolutely. So you guys capture all this information with your decision tree. What happens with that data?
Yeah, good question. So what we do, maybe if you could pull up the Excel spreadsheet, what we kind of envision this with is the decision tree we showed is going to be kind of the inner workings of how everything is calculated. But what you would see as a user of this, trying to calculate cost of poor quality, is something like this here, where you would be asked a series of questions about the issue, and then you would use a drop down. So I think, a lot of companies are familiar with severity of a quality issue, right? So is it something that a quality engineer can just do a quick report, send off to the customer, done? That's a mild. Or is it something where you have to create a task force team, you're meeting with the customer every day, directors are involved? That's more of a high level issue, and that's where you get those kind of like a lot more overhead involved with that. What product is affected, and then what happened, right? So like, was the material reworked? Was the rework successful? If not, did you have to make a new batch? All of these kind of questions that are typical that a quality professional would for sure be able to answer. It's very standard in our day-to-day job. And then looking further with the root cause investigation, what was the effect of that, right? So if your root cause investigation found that you had a faulty raw material and you have to scrap the whole rest of that lot so that you don't run into this with other products, what was the cost of that? That information in particular can be useful to look back on when you're trying to figure out, should we try using this product or this raw material, even though it's slightly out of quality? Like, what's the risk of that? You can come back to something like this and say, oh, well, we used it in this batch and it ended up being $100,000 issue. So maybe let's just not risk it, right? That's another
Yes.
purpose of this. So basically just asking a series of questions and entering info of what was scrapped. And I think ideally if someone that's has more software engineering knowledge than the two of us got involved with this, I think there's some possibility to connect this to like an ERP system, right? So you can actually pull those numbers directly from there. Two of us don't know how to do that, but we can see the vision, so to speak.
Is that the vision for this? Is that this becomes a software platform?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally that would be the best way to help clients and to help companies use it, is if it's kind of a software platform that you can just have a really easy user interface, and that decision tree kind of acts as the back end calculations for everything. And then it can actually flow into a financial model. I think that would be the most kind of streamlined way to use it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. This is
Yeah.
awesome, guys. So what is the then I see graphs and summary financials. Is that really what then the executive team or the management team would use then to enact change on the shop floor or within the organization?
Yes, Jim. So that's the idea. So, this is again like a work in progress for everything. But when I was putting this together, essentially the idea is I took a very traditional P&L. I said, okay, look, what we have here is essentially breaking out further details of, cost of goods and the, net revenue and gross revenue. A lot of what we look at from a financial perspective and how we perform is not just how much things cost, but how much do we spend on warranties, how much do we spend on returns, and how much discounts do we have to give to actually sell our products. Because we can list say a bike for $1,000. But if our true sales price is only 700, the actual sales price is not 1,000. We have to recognize it as 1,000, but then record a $300 discount, right?
Sure.
And so that type of difference between how much we're actually selling it for and how much it costs is something we really want to be able to build into the management view. And so, as I mentioned before, if we're able to really say, hey, the cost of quality or the piece of quality that was part of warranty or the piece of quality that was part of the return is actually 2% of revenue. Okay, that's something we have direct control over as management, as the company. We can go from the top and say, Katie, can you go work with your team and figure out why product A or product B is having these higher percentages in the quality issue area. Same with, cost of goods. If the cost of direct labor for quality is a higher percent of, some certain threshold, we can directly say, are people more taking more time because it's a return and a quality issue versus just building something new? Okay, let's take a look at that. So the idea is that we can really use the numbers to pinpoint really easily from a management perspective where the issues are. Like we were talking about, the people on the ground floor, they know where the problems are.
Yeah.
But there's not enough time in the day for the CEO or the COO to go talk to everyone. So if we're able to filter a lot of that information up into these discrete numbers that can be a way to find the issues with these numbers, then that really allows management to say, okay, here is where we can focus our efforts and our time to look at these quality issues.
I love it, guys. This is one of the most, like I said at the top of the show, the most novel solutions to this, I think, that I've seen. But it definitely is the most human-centric approach to this that I've seen, and I'm a big fan of human-centric leadership and leading in a human-centric way, taking data and using that to empower the people that you lead. So I love this, guys. So Katie, Mingkai, tell us how we can get a hold of you. People who are watching this today, how can people find you?
Yeah, great question. So you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're at Armstrong-Linn Optimal Solutions. You can go to our website, armstronglinn.com. You can email us through there, or you can email either one of us. It's just Katie at armstronglinn.com or Mingkai at armstronglinn.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Awesome. Ming, what didn't I ask you that you want to share with the audience today?
I think the last thing I'll say to everyone is that don't forget how important your financial data is. I think a lot of companies, when they're a little bit younger, when they're a little bit on growth mode and go mode, one thing that they forget is, how do we grow sustainably? How do we grow so that we don't have to keep changing our structures every 3 years and we don't have a crisis of data when the time comes? I think for both Katie and I, one of the things that we really like to emphasize with just our experience and having seen the big and the small and the medium size is that if we're at least setting something up where it's a little bit more future proof than 2 to 3 years, then we can worry about growing more efficiently instead of growing inefficiently. I think even though if you're growing really fast, you're not thinking about how efficient you are, it might really help to set up your structure so that you're spending less money, spending less resources, but growing just as fast.
Love it. Katie, what about you? What didn't I ask you that you want to share?
Let's see. I think we really covered a lot of stuff, but to just kind of go off of what Ming is saying too, I think one thing that we've seen a lot with clients and smaller companies is that when the money's coming in, everything's easy to cover up. So that can sometimes cause people to create processes that are maybe a little bit sloppy or have a lower percent yield. And, kind of the same thing that Ming said about the finance side from the operations side too. It is important to kind of build out those systems early. So your supplier quality system, your manufacturing quality system in general. Again, it can be easy when you have orders coming through and you can't even keep up with them to just say, just do it, we'll make it more efficient later. But I think that there is definitely value in stopping and taking the time to set it up right so that you can ultimately, it will really help you grow faster, even though it feels like a step that might slow you down.
Absolutely love it. Well, thank you both for being on. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap for this episode, and it was a super awesome one. Katie and Mingkai shared practical solutions for overcoming scrap quality issues, but also getting into that root cause analysis and using data to lead on a more human-centric level. I want everybody to remember that that streamlined operation is the foundation for sustainable growth and long-term success. If I were to capture what you both just said there, if you guys want, anybody watching, listening, want to learn more about how Armstrong-Linn can help your business, please visit their website for more resources and information on their services. And don't forget to check out their podcast, Two Hot Takes, Humanizing the Corporate World, for more discussions on optimizing business practices. And if today's episode resonated with you, please drop a comment below, share your own operational challenges, and let's discuss how we can help your business thrive. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to stay updated with more updates featuring game-changing strategies and novel ideas for the manufacturing industry. Thank you all very much for joining us on the Manufacturing Connector, where we uncover tools and insights driving the future of manufacturing. See you next time.